Hello, Avenue parents and families. It's Pastor Dan and Melissa from our family room to your family room, giving you your February online parenting class. Every month, we create these short videos just to give you some encouragement, some equipping, and making sure that you know that you can do life at home the way Christ wants you to do it. This time around, we are going to do a quick recap of our Sunday evening sessions. We've spent the last couple weeks talking about this idea of Christ-centered marriages versus self-centered or spouse-centered marriages in our connection group. If you've not been a part of these groups, we would love for you to join us for the final two sessions coming up in a few weeks. What we started off with talking about is the decision of Christ-centered marriage. So often our marriages are based on ourself or our spouse and our desires. What we need to do is we need to make an intentional decision to change up who we are and what we do as a couple. So the first week we talked about a very difficult passage for a lot of people, Ephesians 5. Ephesians 5 is difficult because it talks about this idea of submission in marriage. So often we get kind of negative connotation of what submission is. What we explained as we read through Ephesians 5 is submission is something different than subservience. Submission in marriage is submitting to each other in godly holiness and understanding who Christ is when it comes to relation to us as a church. We also talked about this idea of really being selfless, not selfish in our marriages. As we read through the past, we realized the whole entire idea here was not of being more selfish, but being more selfless and sacrificial. And that's so very important when it comes to us understanding that marriage is about serving each other and not being served. So the first week, we really dug in on this idea of making a decision that we want to have a Christ-centered, not a self-centered or spouse-centered marriage. And that set us up for the next couple weeks as we talked about a few different pieces of Christ-centered marriages.
Our second session that we had was all about communication and making Christ the center of our communication in our home. The first point that we talked about was having holy hearing versus selfish shouting. And a lot of times it's really hard whenever you're angry or frustrated with your spouse to listen with them with a holy heart instead of having a selfish shouting match where we're yelling our thoughts to someone else. So that was our first point. Our second point was to talk about humble honor versus prideful personal. What we're talking about in that part of it was just having a humble heart, being ready to put aside our thoughts, put aside our pride, our wants, our needs, and put the other person first in our communication whenever we're talking. The third part was having a healing honesty versus wounding words. A lot of times it's really hard in marriage to not bring up and drudge up things from the past. But we talked about using healing words inside of our marriage and allowing Christ to help us to have thoughtful, healing words toward our spouse instead of wounding words that are going to continue this pattern of wounding in the marriage instead of promoting healing where Christ can be the center of it and Christ can lead us to have a more thoughtful and better communication with one another.
Absolutely, and that's what we've been talking about, is this idea of being Christ-centered. Last week, we talked about Christ-centered intimacy. And for a lot of people, they immediately walked in the room thinking that it was one single thing, physical intimacy. And what we did is we backed up and realized that our intimacy starts with spiritual intimacy. That so often we get wrapped up in this idea of movies, TV, even books, about having a soulmate. But God's word talks about the spiritual life, the spiritual man, not the soulish man. So we begin to talk about in our marriage, we need to start with having spiritual intimacy, understanding who each other are, in what we believe, and our love and relationship for Jesus Christ and for each other. We also talked about this idea of emotional intimacy, not fuzzy feelings, but emotional intimacy. So often our relationships are based more on our feelings, our emotions of that moment. What we want to understand is a lifelong commitment and understanding of who we are, how we feel, but our emotions. That God has created us special and unique for us to understand who we are and deal with each other. Not of pursuing happiness, but pursuing true joy with each other. Even in moments of sadness, we can still find joy. And that leads us to what we want to talk about, which is physical intimacy, not bodily lust. So often in marriages, we base our relationship first off on how we see that person and our physical attraction to that person. And what we realize is as we get older, we don't stay the same. Our bodies don't stay the same. But if we understand who we are physically and who we become physically as we get older, our relationship lasts longer and lasts for a lifetime. Understanding that we are Christ-centered, not self-centered or spouse-centered in our relationships changes everything. And that's why we're so excited to continue this conversation 2 weeks from now. We're off this week for the Super Bowl. We wanted to make sure that families had that time together, and then we'll come back together as we talk about understanding a Christ-centered stewardship. There's a lot more than money, but also a Christ-centered home, how marriages lead to a whole entire home that's centered in and on and around the person of Jesus Christ. We're so excited to have these conversations on Sunday night, having some dinner together, offering some childcare together, but getting to know some of you so much better. If you've not been able to come, once again, we invite you to join us for a great time together. 2 weeks from now, we will be back together. As always, Melissa and I are here for you as parents to parents, as a couple to a couple. We want you to know that you have someone to talk to turn to pray with, to cry with. We are here for you as your family pastor, and we love being a part of our church family together. We will talk to you very, very soon. Make sure you check out all the contents in this month's family newsletter.